Mele Kyari, the NMPC Global Managing Director, on Wednesday painted a gloomy picture of tougher times ahead for the Nigerian economy on the back of the latest developments in the global oil market, which has seen markets tumble amid fears of a potential global recession. Now, joining us now to speak on what Nigeria and the world at large need to do to salvage the situation is energy expert Dr. Peter Adamu ETEH. Good morning, sir. Thank you very much for joining us here on the morning show. Well, let's start right here. In your introduction, I said that you were going to be telling us what needs to be done. So, sir, please tell us, for a country like Nigeria, so heavily dependent on oil, what needs to be done to salvage this situation?
Thank you for having me. Good morning. The situation, like the GMD of NNPC said earlier in the week, is really gloomy, but we just have to resign ourselves to fate. What do I mean by that? What we should have done to avoid this unnecessary and destructive headwind, we should have been able to diversify our economy before now. But that has not happened. What has happened in the past is anytime there's a crash in crude oil price globally, leadership in Nigeria and in the industry, we are going to diversify the economy. We look for knee-jerk approaches to see, to calm down the people. And once oil rebounds, nobody does anything. So as we are now, we are actually, like the GMD said, we are in a bumpy ride with strong headwinds, and we do not know where we are going to land. Because as we speak, the vaccine or cure for coronavirus has not been found, or the vaccine has not been developed. So we do not know how long the corona scourge pandemic is going to stretch across the world. How many more months to come, we don't know. Number two, we do not know the price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. We do not know how long it's going to last. And in Nigeria, as we are, there's a saying that when two elephants fight, it is the grass that will suffer. Like as one of my friends put it, when two lions fight, it is the animals that suffer. So in trying to provide solutions on what we can do, practically, I can say, without sounding being pessimistic, that I do not have a cut and nail or ready-made solutions to offer, but I could offer some suggestions on what we could do while we are in this bumpy ride. Number one, it is time for Nigeria now to begin to walk the talk. It is not enough to talk about diversification and then there is no blueprint, there is no clear-cut guideline or roadmap to effecting the diversification. Number two, I also feel that what we have to value what we have. In terms of diversification, what I think we can do immediately is to see how we could assemble a team. I'm not talking of a government team, I'm talking of a multi-sectoral, public-private sector team of experts to begin to say, okay, what are we going to do in practical terms, workable solutions that short-term, medium-term, and long-term. What comes to my mind immediately is the issue of, if you look at us, we've been selling crude oil for the past, how many, God knows when we started producing oil in this country since 1956, 57. And up till now, our refineries are not working. The first thing I think we could do is to begin to see how we can begin to enter into contracts with foreign refineries. Let them refine the crude for us on contract and bring the crude for us, also with the associated petrochemicals. And we could market the refined products and get more money than selling the crude that we've been doing that has not given us any a cushion against price shock as it is. So what I'm saying in essence, we could enter into contracts with foreign refineries, take our crude to them, they then refine it for us, and we market even across the West African sub-region. The other thing we need to do is to begin to think and act in practical terms. What can we do with our agriculture? That has been our mainstay before petroleum became the mainstay. Up till now, previous governments, present government, have been paying lip service to agriculture. Third point, even when we talk of manufacturing, we're hampered because the bulk of the machineries we're thinking of will normally come from China and some of the industrialized nations, which are on lockdown now. So for industrialization and manufacturing to happen, it cannot just be now, because coronavirus has literally paralyzed everywhere. And in terms of even the funding we need to promote and promote our agriculture and diversification, the funding, as it were, is not there. But I'm just giving my thoughts on this. Over to you.
ETEH, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Now, the lower oil prices will undoubtedly have adverse effects on the Nigerian economy, as you have so eloquently discussed. But we're not quite as dependent on oil as we used to be, or even as the likes of other countries like Angola. Is that a shining light for us in this dreary situation?
Yes, it is. Unlike Angola, that is like 100% dependent on oil, Nigeria, our dependence on oil now, plus minus, is not much. But don't also forget that even the non-oil sectors that we are depending on, in terms of custom duties, in terms of even internally generated revenue, don't forget that the bulk of the import that we have into this country is they're from China and some of the industrialized nations. And these are the nations that are hardly hurt by coronavirus. And if you take a cursory look in Nigeria today, the bulk of our businessmen and women that import goods and services from China, that is not happening now. Along ditto for other South Korea, Italy, and some other industrialized nations of the world. So we may not be as dependent on oil like Angola, but then our non-oil service sector depends on importation, depends on custom duties and taxes that we get from services that we import. So if you compare orange to orange, between us and Angola, yes, we may not be as hard hit like them, but we are not free from being hit after all. Over to you.
Yes, and you make very, very salient points there. But let's look at some of the moves that the Nigerian, the managers of Nigeria's economy, including the Minister for Finance, Budget and National Planning, said that there's a need to review the 2020 budget downwards. And we do recall that Mele Kyari, the boss of the NNPC, says that Nigeria is looking at increasing Nigeria's oil production output per day from 2.1 million to 3 million. How realistic are some of these moves by the economic managers for the nation? And the issue of reviewing the 2020 budget downwards, would that be advisable at this time?
Well, we have no choice than to review the budget downwards, because the funds we need to fund the budget is being eroded by the crash in crude price and then the other restrictions imposed by coronavirus. So I agree with the Minister of Finance. She talked brilliantly that they need to midterm review of the budget, which is inevitable. Number two, it is not enough to say, oh, you want to increase crude production from 2.1 million as you were to 3 million. That is good talk. But how is that going to happen? If you look at the production facilities we have now, or if you look at in terms of even growing our reserves, over the years, what have we done? We have done nothing. Up till now, PIB has not been passed. Investment climate is hazy in Nigeria, and appetite for investment by especially international oil and gas companies has been very low. So I do not see the capacity we have now in view of vandalism of oil products, in view of some deferments here and there because of community agitations in the Niger Delta. I do not see how that ambitious talk of saying you want to raise production from 2.18 million barrels per day as it is now to $3 million. Perhaps the Minister of Petroleum, the GM of NNPC and the Minister of Petroleum, they may have the magic wand that I do not understand. But for now, as we speak, I do not see how that is going to happen.
On the topic, on the topic of not knowing what's going to happen, or rather what needs to be done, earlier you said that perhaps a multi-sectoral team could be put together. Perhaps Nigeria could be in a position where they could sell their crude to refiners who would then give it back to them, or Nigeria could have its own refineries. I mean, how feasible do you think these ideas are? Because if they were easy to implement, you would think common sense dictates that it would have happened already. Those things haven't happened as you put them. So what do you think can be done? And with the things that you highlighted there, a team of experts, Nigeria perhaps refining its own oil, how long do you think it would take for that to actually become a reality? Are you confident that it could become a reality?
Well, it depends on the will of government to make it happen. One thing that Nigeria has is we have tried and tested experts in all sectors of oil and gas industry. So, but what has been happening is government has been playing King Solomon syndrome. Government believes that its name is Mr. Wisdom. And most of the time, when they want to set up a committee, they will just assemble people in government that are limited by their understanding, people who have no commercial mindset, and who have no speed, and who have no delivery enzymes in their system. So what I'm thinking is, if you want to do a thing like this, you get experts across the line, not just government. You could get experts from the international oil and gas companies. You could get experts from NNPC, even from indigenous players. And they will be able to sit down and point blank tell us what can be done. It will not just be theory, it will be theory and action, where you provide a solution and you draw a roadmap to achieving that solution. Now, number two, the fact that it has not happened before does not mean that it cannot happen. If we've been doing the same thing over the years, we should not expect new results. But what I'm thinking now is a new thinking to say, okay, we have been selling our crude over these years, and our refineries, for God's sake, are not working. And for the past 5 years, I'm not aware that the current government has done any turnaround maintenance on our refineries. So if we want to say, okay, let us sell our crude or to contracted refineries abroad, I believe it can be done. Legal frameworks can be put in place, proper agreements entered into, with hard timelines, I believe it can be done.
Dr. Peter, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. It is now time for us to go on a short break, but we will be rejoining you after the break to discuss Nigeria's managed exchange rate. Stay with us.
Right, you're welcome back. You're still watching the morning show this Saturday. We've been speaking with Dr. Peter Adamu ETEH on the impact of the coronavirus on the Nigerian economy and, of course, more importantly, the way forward. Thanks for staying with us. Well, with the expected budget deficit, including the impact of the coronavirus, Nigeria plans to borrow some $22 billion. Would you be in support of that, if we're to shore up Nigeria's economy? And I'd like you to address some of the more sustainable ways that Nigeria can actually stabilize the economy.
Yes, as it is, I will support the taking of the $22 billion dollars loan. And the government has come up with what they want to use the loans for. But unfortunately, the thinking about taking the loan was done before the issue of coronavirus came. And if you ask me, the bulk of the infrastructure, the social infrastructure, they want to use the loan to provide. I would advise that that money could be used to revitalize the economy in terms of rejuvenating agriculture and promoting manufacturing in country. Because as it is now, the shortfall we're going to have from our crude oil sales, the deficit is going to be much, and with the budget review, as you know, most of the time, it is capital expenditure that will suffer the most. But I think capital expenditure may not need to suffer the most, but that we could also temper with recurring expenditure by reducing and eliminating areas of waste in the budget, as it were, in terms of travels, in terms of welfare, in terms of some jumbo pay for some public officers. Those can be reduced, etc., etc. Now, in terms of sustainability, if we focus on agriculture, good enough, when we take the loan and we divert it to agriculture, for example, we will be able to empower farmers across the country, across the sea geopolitical zones, who have different vegetation and climate, and they can produce different crops across the country. Because what has happened is that we've been borrowing money to spend on infrastructure, on roads, on bridges, on railways, etc., etc. But then those things in themselves, they may not they are not connected to the economy as it were, because they produce mind you, let's not even forget that oil and gas itself contributes maybe about how much, plus minus about 10% to our GDP. Agriculture contributes much more. So I think that if government will also again come up with different thinking, you have a lot of river development basins, you have a lot of SMEs, you have a lot of programs going on. If government can bring together the chambers of commerce, the SMEs, and some banks, etc., to come to thinking on how they can fund agriculture. And when I mean fund agriculture, I'm not talking of portfolio farmers. I'm talking of actual farmers, that the money can reach these farmers and we will be able to up our game in the agricultural sector. The same thing, part of that money also can go to manufacturing. For example, in the whole of northern Nigeria, the textile mills that were the mainstay of the northern economy in the 60s, 70s, and even early 80s are all in comatose position. And when you have textile mills running, the raw material for textile mills is cotton. Farmers can be made to grow cotton and encouraged to grow cotton, empowered to grow cotton, and the textile industries they get the raw materials for their production. So these are simple things that I think can be done to take us out of where we are. Over to you.
I'm mentioning Nigeria's managed exchange rates because that is a primary point of concern for a lot of economists, Nigerian and global economists, and they're saying that even prior to the fallout from OPEC's failure to reach an agreement with Russia on oil production cuts, the country's foreign exchange reserves were in steady decline. Now, I'm mentioning the foreign exchange as it stands. As of last week, it was 350 naira to the dollar. As of 2 days ago, it was 405 naira to the dollar. And as of 22 hours ago, it has now fallen to 420 naira to $1. So seemingly, we are in a state of free fall. My question to you is, where do we go from here? How do we stem it?
Thank you very much. It's a sad situation, and you see me laughing in sadness. The truth of the matter is, in an economy like Nigeria, where we consume what we don't produce, and when our economy is like monocultural, dependent on oil, once there's a fall in oil, it becomes a free fall. I think, as it is, we have to remain in OPEC. I believe we have to remain in OPEC. It's good for us. At least OPEC has acted as a stabilizing factor in the crude price market globally, regardless of what the price of between Russia and Saudi Arabia now. I think the only way out now, as it is going to be free fall, and some people are speculating currency devaluation, which is already happening anyway by default. I think that what we need to do to stabilize our economy, to stabilize our currency, is to promote in-country manufacturing, and also for Nigeria to tame our appetite for imported goods. If we are producing what we are consuming, our currency will be stronger. And if we are able to domesticate some of the imports that we do, for example, rather than importing cars or importing machinery, why can't government come up with policies that will make these people to establish plants in Nigeria to manufacture those products, machineries in Nigeria? As long as we don't do that, and we have appetite for foreign goods, both software and hardware, and our economy, we are not diversifying our economy, we are consuming what we don't produce, the naira cannot be strong. And in this atmosphere of uncertainty of coronavirus, vis-a-vis the sharp drop in demand for crude and the price war between Saudi and Russia, I do not know where we are heading to. Over to you.
I mean, it's very, very unclear where anyone is heading to. And it's interesting that Milekari, the GMD of NNPC, did state that about 50 cargoes of crude oil are still, just lying there with no off-takers. But let's come back to the banking sector. That's a very, very critical aspect of turning around the economy. It seems that for a very long time, Nigerian banks are not ready, willing, or even able to fund or finance the real sector, which is the key engine room of driving the economy. Is there a need for a reforming of the Nigerian banking sector, and how quickly should that happen?
Absolutely, there's a need for reforms in the banking sector. And when we're talking about reforms again, we have to bring people who know what they are talking about. I'm not talking of government reform. I'm talking of, even if it means bringing international experts to be part of that reform. So the world has globalized so that we'll be able to get get to our destination where we're going to. Number two, even after the reforms, the issue of compliance, the issue of regulation is a big issue. I know central bank has many, many lofty policies as regards lending by banks, etc., but the banks have not followed it. What happens in Nigeria, if you look at most of the toxic loans that AMCOM has taken over, is it to poor farmers? I mean, there are people who go to borrow billions of naira without collaterals. And meanwhile, the poor farmer in the village or small subsistence farmers are looking for just little amount of money to turn the tide to make the difference. So I agree with you totally that in this confusion now, there will be a need to have reforms in the banking sector where we'll be able to tell ourselves to say, okay, what can we do? What have we not been doing right? And what can we do to get it right? Number two, government also, in terms of funding, the banks themselves have turned themselves to be a susu, in terms of collecting money, in terms of contributing to the economy. Nigerian banks are not there yet, because for today, as a contract or a job, and you go to a bank to borrow money, interest rate on loans to do a job is about 25-27%. Now, how much profit are you going to make as an SME to borrow that kind of money? Factoring in the fact that when you work, they may not pay you over 2, 3, 4, 5 months, and the interest is accruing. So I agree with you totally that government will have to come with fresh banking reforms, whether it will mean that many more banks will have maybe higher recapitalization, and then also new ways of doing business, and even if possible, making the banks, compelling them to give loans
All right, Dr. Peter Adamu, ETEH energy analyst, thank you so much for your insights this morning.